quickly got into the ideal position for hip motions and knee motions. Hip is another area, like we mentioned, that can be considered somewhat invasive, and so having what is it, sheet that you can cover your patient up with can be very beneficial. Okay. Little trick for this is you take the bottom corner of the side that you're going to work on, the sheet, and I may actually just
make it big.
Oops, we've hamburger, hot dog instead of hot dog.
We're having a tortilla right now.
We're having
Open it up.
So I grab the corner of the side that I'm working on, and I just take that corner and I stick it under the knee of the patient, and then I pull up towards their hip.
Side wedgie.
Okay? It's a nice little side wedgie. And it's exposed the knee and all the area that I need to have access to as far as taking them through range of motion. But it's also made it so that she keeps all of her dignity intact. She's covered. Okay? And if I need to, I can tuck it under or do whatever I need to make sure that she's okay with that. So, hip flexion and knee flexion, we can kind of get both of them at the same time. Okay? I'm going to have one hand that comes underneath the knee, and then the other hand is going to be at the wrist. So, again, ankle, jeez.
My wrist.
How's that going? We're going to move like no. So one's at the knee and one's at the ankle. There you go. Okay, so I'm going to hit hip flexion and knee flexion both at the same time. All you have to do is with my left hand, or the one under the knee, as I start to lift up, and then with my hand that's at the, I almost said it again, at the ankle, I'm going to help go into a little bit more knee flexion. Okay, so the one under the knee is helping the hip flexion, the one under the ankle, the ankle is helping the knee flexion.
Body part.
Okay, and then as I come up, I get to a point where now my hand up here is all backwards and it's not very comfortable. So I just take and put my thumb under there. Just do a quick switch. Here I don't have to worry too much about the knee being supported because I'm doing a lot with the ankle. So I just slyly put my thumb in there and slide, and then I can push down the ankle to get my max knee flexion as well. Okay, I'm not going to go any farther than that as far as hip flexion. I know that I could. I really pushed her, but I'm starting to get a little bit of resistance, and so I'm just going to come back to knee extension and then hip neutral. Up and back. So I'm just kind of dancing with it. Right. If I want to go into hyperextension, it'd be the same as the shoulder. I can have her scoop towards the edge of the table a little bit. I bring her off the table, that leg off the table, and I'm just going to drop it down into some hyperextension. I can do it that way. If I don't feel like I'm getting as much range as she has, I'll put the patient in prone, and then do it just like a hyperextension measurement with goniometry. Okay?
Or even sideline too.
Or even sideline. Yep.
If you have them in sideline, then you can kind of slip your arm underneath kind of where the bend is at their knee, and then you can just kind of work the hip into extension.
We'll just show you guys.
You can put your leg on that. You should show us.
So I can go here, and then I'll do this so I can support that
Fire
hip,
hydrant.
and just bring her back into hyperextension and then come back. Hyperextension and come back. Okay? Good. So that's hip flexion, hip hyperextension, knee flexion, and obviously knee extension as well when you come back. Yes?
For the practical, what we're going to get is it going to be hip flexion and knee flexion at the same time? We're not going to have one or the other.
It may not, but we're not going to dock you if it just says do hip flexion and you do it the way that we just showed you and you get knee flexion. So that's fine.
There might be a situation where you do have to isolate one or the other. For whatever reason, they're not allowed to move that hip that far, or they're not allowed to move that knee that far. If they've got a burn, if they've got they had some orthopedic surgery done on their knee, but you don't want the hip to get stiff. So you might be in a situation where, yeah, keep the knee straight, but we want to work the hip.
Yeah. Okay. Next, we'll do hip add and abduction, and then internal external rotation. So I'll have it lie back on your back again. So add and abduction, similar to the shoulder, right? Again, I'm going to support under the knee and the ankle, and I'm just going to step out into some abduction, and then bring her back to abduction. Out and back. Out and back. Okay, yes.
Just ask a quick question before I forget. For documentation, would you do like right hip, PROM, ABD, or yeah? So like.
And if there's a different position, then say like this, or what we consider normal, then
So
we're
like
gonna
sideline.
document that.
Okay.
Yep.
Gotcha.
Okay. So lastly, there's hip internal and external rotations. You can do it a couple of different ways. One is just keeping the patient straight knee, straight hip, just like this, and then just rolling them on the plinth. Internal, external rotation. The other way is, again, if you feel like you're not getting full range, you can bring them up into
Sorry, I wasn't relaxing.
up into hip flexion, 90 degrees of hip flexion, and then go in and out. This.
Most patients will probably feel better stretch or a bigger range doing this than being in long axis rotation.
Okay? Those are the hip and the knee motions. Any questions?
So I will, if I was doing hip and knee, I'll usually, as long as the patient doesn't have a pressure ulcer on their heel, I like to control them here. Just preference. You can take a lot of weight through it, and then you can also use your arm to basically push into them instead of having to kind of lift and support quite as much. So I find it maybe just a little bit easier. But again, if somebody does have a pressure ulcer, which is a pretty common sight, then this would by far be the better way to grip it. But that's another option.
Cool. Thank you.